Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Thursday afternoon webinar, or part of ATARC's Thursday After Lunch webinar series. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jonathan Albaum, and I am the Principal Digital Strategist for the federal government at ServiceNow. I'm taking over for Tom Suter today, and I'm going to be moderating this fireside chat. Today, we're going to cover a framework for dealing with a crisis like we're all dealing with now during the pandemic. Our federal CIO panelists will go in depth about the changes and the innovations they've had to incorporate into their agency and how they plan to make these changes part of their ongoing operations moving forward. So I want to welcome everybody to today's session. I want to thank the entire ATARC team. I want to thank Connie Coleman from ServiceNow and the entire ServiceNow team for sponsoring today's event. So this afternoon, we're going to hear from two well-established CIOs. We're going to hear from Jason Gray, who is a CIO for the Department of Education. And we're going to hear from Mark Patterson, who is the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Defense Education Activity. It's part of DoD. So I'd like to begin by asking Jason and Mark to introduce themselves and provide a little bit of background on their careers and their organizations. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with Mark.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Patterson, as mentioned. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Department of Defense Education Activity. If you're familiar with us, you probably know us as DODEA or DODEA. We like to use those acronyms, or previously we would have been called DODS or DDES. We operate right now 160 schools in 8 districts located in 11 countries, 7 states, and 2 territories across 10 time zones. That's a lot. It is. It's a very exciting mission. To summarize it, what we do is we're the K through 12 school district for military-connected children. There are about 990,000 military-connected children around the world. Within DODEA, we support about 70,000, which is around 7%. We also have a workforce of about 12,500. Again, spread around the world. About 8,000 of those are teachers and administrators. Worldwide, great mission. Love the kids, support the kids, and a huge .edu network that we support to keep those schools up and operating. Again, as mentioned previously, this has been a challenging time. I think we'll talk more in depth in a little bit about some of the challenges we faced and some of the things that we put in place or will be putting in place very quickly to adapt to this evolving environment that we're in. That's all I have, Jonathan. Pretty quick and easy.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Mark. Jason, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, a little bit of background on who you are and Department of Education.
Great. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for having me. I am well aware of the DODEA comment. Started my career in the DoD. So this is the 5th agency I've actually been at, being in education for now a little over 4 years as their CIO. We have around a little over $800 million from an IT portfolio standpoint of systems and services that we provide, which is the full spectrum. Nationwide, we've got IT operations, governance, cybersecurity. When I got to the department, I know we're here to talk about resilience, but when I got to the department, my focus was really on 5 key focus areas. Number 1 was cybersecurity, which is absolutely critical and continues to be. Number 2 was governance, which is kind of how does everything work and how do you oversee it and make sure that you're spending tax-paying dollars appropriately. Number 3, which has been absolutely critical, and I plan on talking a little bit about this today, is IT modernization. Number 4 is user experience, because it's absolutely critical. And number 5, organizational health, because if you don't have a healthy organization, the people actually deliver all the services that everyone depends on doesn't go very well. So it's been a great experience in education. I love working for government. I love the mission of education. I think it's great that that Mark and I's mission align very, very well. Not sure if that was orchestrated correctly, but that's beautiful. So looking forward to the conversation.
And thanks, Jason. And what a perfect set of CIOs to have as people are preparing to go back to school, right? Think about education and children, and it's just an example of how we've all had to sort of reframe our thinking about just about everything, including how we educate our children, to how we run our organizations, how we interact with our customers. So I want to thank Mark and Jason for kicking things off. I'm going to go ahead and share a couple of slides that will help frame out some of the questions that we're going to focus on. So let me go ahead and do that. So the concept of this new normal and a roadmap to the new normal, a lot of people are talking about. When this happened at ServiceNow, we all sort of defaulted back to some experience we had previously, and the immediate experience was one of responding to the crisis at hand. And as we get into the conversation, I really want Jason to be able to talk about how his organization responded, because I think they did it extremely well. But that was the mode we were all in for the first 4 or 5 weeks. So many organizations just figuring out how to support this remote work and support the mission in a remote way. What we do want to focus on a little bit more today, though, is how do you take all those changes and embed them in your organization so you're ready as you move forward? And whatever the next crisis is, if it's a continuation of the pandemic, if it's an earthquake, if it's a flood, it is some other catastrophic event, you're ready. And the ability to maintain productivity in time of crisis is there, irrespective of your organization or how you do your work. And then lastly is this longer term idea of real resiliency. I like to think about it as true digital transformation. When you get to the point where the organization can operate really no matter what's happening. You've automated the parts that can be automated. You rely less on humans to do certain tasks. There's more AI. There's more connectivity across systems and across agencies and across people. So that's where I think this whole thing is going. And this is a frame for some of the talk that we're going to have today. And one of the concepts that I think supports this is this idea of a platform. We talked about platform as a service often. I think it's a strategy that a lot of organizations are adopting in order to be better prepared. And platform strategies support this idea of end-to-end workflows and empowering people to either create workflows or move data around to get their work done more efficiently. Core is data integration. Experiences really matter, I think, in a time like this when there's a lot of uncertainty, and the ability to collaborate has changed for people in this environment because we don't have the same opportunity to interact that we used to. So bringing that online is clearly important. And long term, it's about flexibility, interoperability, being able to see into your processes and your organization to understand how work is going. So it's a strategy built around platforms, I think, is making a difference in some of the organizations I see. And very quickly from a ServiceNow perspective, we talk about platforms all the time. ServiceNow is a platform company. We built a very robust platform. We refer to it as the Now platform, and everything that you know about ServiceNow is sort of baked into that platform. The configuration management database, integration capabilities, developer tools, mobile components, and it's on top of that platform that the IT workflows that IT service management or IT operations or employee workflows for onboarding, offboarding, or customer service workflows, or the ability to build custom workflows through the App Engine. All of those things ride on the Now platform, which is a platform for workflow. The core to it really is the integration with data in a variety of systems, whether they are systems that are quote unquote legacy or they're newer systems. It's the core data that an agency needs. So the integration of that data, leveraging that data via workflow to drive mission outcomes is really, I think, one of the calling cards for a platform company like ServiceNow. And ServiceNow likes to think of ourselves as the platform of the platforms. We can connect the data in very meaningful ways and allow people to interact with it through the tools that they are most comfortable with: web tools, chat tools, mobile devices. And that's important part of the ServiceNow story, that ability to connect the disconnected aspects of an operation. And that's become increasingly important in today's age. The unstructured collaboration we relied on in the past doesn't necessarily work so well any longer. So as we think about today's questions, whether it's platforms or it's the integration of data, it's the integration of systems, I think a lot of what we'll hear about is increased collaboration and the ability to drive mission outcomes by working together in different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and pause there, and I want to jump into a couple of questions. And this one I want to lead off with Jason. And Jason, if I can ask you, can you talk a little bit about your modernization journey at the Department of Education and how it really set you up for that response phase that we talked about in the beginning of these slides?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your slide deck and talking about the importance of the platform, because coming into a new organization, the first thing you want to understand, and this is something you learned many, many years ago, is what am I responsible for? You want to do an inventory, you want to have an understanding of all of the things that you're responsible for, which is, ideally you have that, it's all in a nice little CMDB, and ideally. But what we did is we started doing an assessment shortly after getting to the department, and focused on creating a visualization of our as-is environment. And the focus was on connecting a lot of those dots. And again, I mentioned the 5 focus areas. It was cybersecurity, what do I have? Governance, what do I have? IT modernization, what do I have? And from there, which literally took a few months to get that done, we thought, okay, well, let's talk about some of the things we want to achieve going forward. And we focused on 3 real key things. When I saw the as-is environment, it was focused on, we had a lot of cloud. Fortunately, at the Department of Education, we're 100% cloud. So while a lot of government is focused on data center optimization, consolidation, at the Department of Education, we're focused on cloud consolidation and optimization because we had a lot of cloud. And so that was one of the key areas. We also looked at rationalization from an application system standpoint, because we realized through the assessment that we had some duplicative services that we were paying for and dependent on, and we looked at ways to consolidate them. And the third key area was automation. How can we automate some of these systems with manual process? So we looked at the as is, then we created a to-be, and then a roadmap to actually get there. And I will say that our IT modernization journey literally kicked off last year. The contracts were awarded. We made our final transition in May of last year, and it could not have come at a more perfect time because in the past environment, we were working with systems that were really slow, where now the impact of the pandemic at the department has been rather insignificant.
So timing is everything in life and information technology, right? Jason, when you started down that technology modernization, what kind of leadership support did you get, and how did you make it relevant to the mission of the Department of Education?
So that's a great question, and I definitely would attribute a large part of the success to the support that we have had. A large part of my career has been working in healthcare IT, although as time goes on, it's getting less and less. But in healthcare, you need an emergency room. And from my experience, a lot of IT organizations tend to run like an emergency room. But to your point, when you talk about resiliency, it's about creating the more tactical and strategic decisions, of which IT modernization is one of them. So it was really about communicating what we're doing and why we're doing it and the impact of what we're doing as it related. So to give you an example, on day 2, when I got to the department, I was given this long, during an all staff or an all hands meeting, someone had shared that, do you know how much time we waste waiting for our machines to boot up? what was fascinating is on day 3, I was like, wow, what did I get myself into? But that was a key anchor point of, listen, I know that I can make this faster. And we went from around a 20-minute boot up time with all of the layers of stuff that we had to less than 42 seconds through modernization and through the strategy that we had. And that, just from a number standpoint, returned literally over 1,500 hours a day in productivity to the department a day.
That's incredible.
Millions of dollars of lost productivity where people would be waiting to. So in terms of getting the support, having those metrics and having that data and being able to go to my leadership and say, you won't have to hear people complaining about their IT anymore. That alone was one thing. And then 2, the cost savings and the return on investment is where we got the buy-in.
So just getting people focused on the day-to-day and taking away some of the complexity of the mundane.
Yes.
It's like you just added people, added full-time employees to the organization. So I think that's a great start, Jason. Thank you. I want to turn to Mark and hear your story, Mark. How did you begin this process of transitioning to remote work, and not just remote work, setting up an environment where children could be educated in a remote way where necessary?
We, very similar. I listened to Jason speak, and it's like bringing back the pathway that I'm following as well. So there's a lot of similarities. I will say one of the key things I found, and I've been at DoDEA about 2 years, as we did a lot of that same looking that many of us do when we were new to an organization. One of the areas I identified to look at was partnerships, and begin to develop those partnerships with our different educational organizations out there, externally, partnerships with many of the schools under the Department of Education, to understand how really to run IT, not coming from an educational background, how to run IT in an educational environment. So I had to learn very quickly, because wasn't on board very long. And then here comes this thing called COVID. I call it BC. Before COVID, everything was running smooth. We were starting to rationalize our applications. We'd identified those different platforms that we were moving to. We'd put our foot in the door of cloud migration. We already had a number of, as Jason mentioned, cloud offerings already up and running out there, trying really to pull that together. And then right as we hit the middle of school year last year, around February, South Korea's schools started closing. And then it became this ripple effect. The problem we found, that the challenge, it wasn't a problem, it was a challenge, is that we had to change from a on-prem teacher teaching environment to a fully remote environment and utilize the tools that we had. I'm an old Army soldier, so I'm going to use what I have right now. I know that I will get something in the future, but we have to use what we had. So we had to use those advancements that we made. We had to use those partnerships. And we also had to use what I think a big push of innovation. So when we finally closed our final school, we had 8,500 teachers that weren't necessarily used to teaching in a remote environment. Now they're struggling, they're trying to learn, just like you mentioned, Jonathan, earlier. Students are trying to learn, how does a kindergartner or a first grader now operate in an environment that they're not used to? They're used to watching cartoons. Now they have to watch their teacher, and they have to learn that way. So there was a lot going on from that avenue. We found that communication was very important. Collaboration was key to that. We had some technical challenges with our VPN. We had to do some workarounds. We operate our educational side in G Suites for Education. So we had to quickly expand that environment. We weren't necessarily prepared for where we were going. We definitely weren't prepared for Google Classroom and those other things that now were necessary for that teacher to learn. So we actually made that transition in about a 4-day period. We transitioned from brick and mortar learning for all our schools into the Google Classroom, the G Suites environment, tool sets, enhanced security in about a 4-day period. Was it perfect? No. I think you always have that kid that's going to try to find ways around and try to Google bomb his teacher. We had that, but we found ways to prevent that, and we kept working and working. So as we moved into this environment, I got to give credit to our teachers and teachers around the world. And I think Jason will probably echo that with me, that are facing all these new challenges now, as well as the parents and the students, because it is a totally different learning environment. But from a technology perspective, we had already put a number of things in place that allowed that collaboration and communication. We were already using our platforms. That made change a lot easier. That made communication a lot easier. That made automation a lot easier. Where in the past, we would have had to code a Cold Fusion application that would have taken weeks or multiple people. We could change code. We could modify workflows. We could make those changes very quickly in hours compared to weeks or months as it was previously. So we were prepared. Yeah.
I think that's a great point. You know, this is not to say there's never a time to develop a custom application, but most of the time, the things we do are similar across organizations. It's about workflow, to your point. It's about moving data and getting approvals and, you know, various kinds of, related activities. So if you have a platform for workflow and you can use it, you're at the 50-yard line, you know, and you can sprint to the end zone, perhaps. I think there was, Mark, there was something in there that you mentioned that I had a reaction to. You talked about you got the Google Classroom up and running. Technically, it worked. But there's that whole change management piece, not just for the students to learn, but, I come from a family of teachers, and I was with my sister and my sister-in-law recently, and hearing them, a lot of anxiety around teaching in this upcoming school year, and they will be remote in the beginning of the year. What, how did teachers adjust culturally to that kind of change? And, was there a role for your organization in supporting them through that?
Oh, yes. So it was a big change for many teachers. Like I'm struggling with this, what we're doing here. I'd much rather be in person standing beside you and Jason talking. Same way with a teacher in many instances, the way they relate to the students. We saw such positive activity from many teachers who used YouTube, and the kids, especially the high school students, they fell right into this. This was good for them. It was the younger kids that we had to really work with. So the teachers had to learn how to teach differently. They had to learn how to teach remotely, as well as even our staff. You know, we were an organization, BC, before COVID, that didn't telework a lot. We did not have a lot of telework. So now all of a sudden, you've got 8,500 people trying to telework when they're not even used to how to connect to the VPN. How do I report a problem? What if I can't connect to the VPN? So there were a lot of changes in a very short period of time. That's where I think the collaboration and the change management came in. Communication was key. How do I log into the VPN? What do I do? That constant communication helped that teacher, I believe, sort of get more comfortable with teaching in an environment that previously they weren't comfortable with. Some people will never get comfortable with this environment. It's just not doesn't bode well for some people, but these teachers, they overcame. I'll continue to give them props. Hopefully they're not watching this. They'll get big heads, but they did a great job in what they've done. Teachers around the world, I can't say enough as to how they're doing that. So we went to the remote environment. To expand on that a little bit more, we are now operating in 3 environments. We're operating in a brick and mortar environment, we're operating in a remote environment, and we're also operating a virtual school. So in a pattern of 7 months, we've went from 1 operating environment to now operating in 3. So
congratulations. I mean, it shows what's possible, right? It's a great, it's a great example. And Jason, let's just switch back to you for a second. As we've been chatting, you shared a story, which hopefully you can share with us, the audience now. You had to make some quick innovations in terms of how you got people PIF cards and badges, and there was some complexity there. That wasn't something, as I understand it, you were anticipating, and you had to react very quickly. Now you have some new capabilities in your environment, it sounds like. So would you please share that story with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to add to Mark's comment, though, because I absolutely agree. The partnership and collaboration is key. And I know Fatara does a lot for that, of making sure that the CXO communities work together. But the reality is, if you don't have those partnerships, it's a much heavier lift and challenge. So in terms of some of the challenges, yes, when we I felt like operationally we were in a really good place. Everything was new, everything was modern. We had communicated, this is how the department had while the amount of telework was less than where we're at today, everyone was used to teleworking and knew how to telework and knew how to connect to our VPN solution. So the lift wasn't a lot of that. Literally, and I know I had shared with you before, when the pandemic first hit, our average speed to answer from a call standpoint went to, I think, around 55 seconds. And within 2 days, it was back down to 14 seconds. So everyone was used to the environment. But one of the challenges that we were not anticipating was when people couldn't come in and get PIV cards. The multi-factor authentication, CAC if you're in DoD, that you couldn't get them. So we went to several of the vendors who are providing the services because we're a contractor-owned, contractor-operated IT organization. And this is going to take several weeks or months to actually engineer a solution. The bottom line is we knew that we had around 2 weeks because we were going to be having new employees come into the department, and we needed to be able to provision them equipment that could log in and authenticate to our environment. And very quickly, the teams worked, and within 5 days, 2 of those days being over a weekend, they came up with an approved solution that would allow us to provision equipment, send out equipment to people's homes. So it's really changed the way. But to your point earlier, I think having a platform that could manage that was absolutely critical, because when you have a bunch of requests coming in, and if you didn't have a centralized vehicle to manage all of that and know where your pain points were, that would have been a nightmare. So in the end, the fact that we actually do have a solid platform that actually manages IT requests or service issues and provisioning equipment, whether it's credentialing or issuing equipment, that enabled us to make that a smooth transition than if we hadn't had that. So, but that was just one of the challenges we faced.
Well, now you have a new capability in your environment, right? And you can bring people on board remotely, and you can provision them remotely. So some CIOs that I've spoken with, where they've had these kinds of experiences, they very, in the rush to get it done, they did it in a way that it works, but it might not be sustainable. It might not be scalable. They have to revisit. Jason, what did you do to make sure that as you implemented those changes very quickly, you did it so they become part of your readiness and your organization? So, it's not going to break. You feel comfortable and confident in it and its ongoing success.
So that's a great question. I think collaboration is probably the key there, is that yes, we did it for education, but we also communicated across the CIO Council what our approach was, because we knew other agencies may have similar challenges. We brought in DHS as well to talk about what we were doing. So it was really the collaboration of government that, at least in my mind, ensured that it was a scalable solution that was repeatable. And to your point, from a new item in our tool chest, if you will, in the past, if we would have had a situation where people could not perhaps leverage a PIV card, the answer would have been, well, you wait a couple of days and come into the office and we'll get the fix for you. Now we don't have to wait. We can do it right away. Usually it's next day or faster. So it has changed the way that we can, the speed at which we can deliver service. But the scalability, that was literally through a partnership and collaboration.
No, it's a great story. If you get people productive faster, they can do their jobs more quickly. Mark, any reaction or similar kind of story you'd like to share with the audience?
I think, what we built and what we had to innovate and those things we put in place, we were always thinking to the future. Even though the future was unknown, we wanted them to be sustainable. We have as being the Department of Defense, as Jason does as well, very robust cybersecurity requirement. We did not want to do anything in our innovative ideas that would affect the data or affect access to the kids, those kind of things. So we always had to think that as part of our process. And we have a great cybersecurity group that came in, everybody back to that partnership, collaboration, and communication. Any changes that we made moving forward, we wanted to make sure and align them with the necessary regulation, assess the risks, but look at what we were doing for the future. It's like our Google environment. We could have built it up and we could have taken it down at the end of the year, thinking we're all going back into brick and mortar schools this year. But instead, we built it up and sustained it. And it was very similar to a number of our applications. COVID reporting is not going away. So we have an application to where those things are reported and we're tracking and monitoring. That's not going away. That was a quick fix, but also may be there with us for a number of years. And also data retention too is very important. The collection of the data and the retaining of the data for lessons learned, as well as moving forward in the future. So we saw a lot of the same things probably Jason did, but always continued, as many people do, thinking to the future. What we build has to endure. It has to stay. It's either a foundation to build off on in the future, but you got to put effort into that foundation. If you don't put the effort in the foundation, you'll never be able to build on it.
So begin with the future in mind. That's what I just wrote down here.
And it was challenging because even you don't know the future. You can anticipate. And that's a lot, I think, of what we do as CIOs anyway, knowing that the future's not known from a budgetary and a technology perspective, but you have to put that effort into saying, okay, this isn't probably going to go away. We may be working differently for the next 2 to 3 years. Build it so by year 2, we can relook at it. So.
Right. Well, I think it's not a overstatement to say that we live in a highly complex world. It's very interconnected. There are a lot of risks out there. And as we're thinking about running operations that support complex organizations, you need flexibility, you need adaptability, the interoperability we talked about. Those are all things you're describing here. Integration of different technologies very quickly to maintain and achieve long-term business outcomes, mission outcomes. So good story so far. We're gonna pause for just a second, and we're gonna put up a poll to get some audience input. So you're gonna see 2 questions up here now. So the first is asking the audience, what the greatest challenges were as your agency moved into to become a digital organization? And then on a scale of 1 to 5, how challenging was the transition to remote work as as we made these changes related to COVID? So please go ahead and answer the poll, and we'll share the results back. All right. So as we move on, I want to pivot for just a second and talk a little bit about the opportunities that come out of this kind of situation. We're all very focused on. I think about it as the inside. We have an inside-out approach sometimes to the way we serve our customers. We know what we need as the government officials, or what our programs need, and we structure systems and approaches so we can get that. But we don't always think first about how the customers interact across systems or across the agencies. And if we are able to think strategically about the way we have we design our systems and we build, we can meet customers where they are, I think, much more efficiently. So thinking about that idea, working from the outside and working from what your employees need or your students need, what kind of opportunities emerge in this new paradigm, in the new normal, and working remotely for an unknown period of time? What can we do different, and how can we really change the way our agencies work? Start with Jason. Any thoughts or comments we might be able to build upon?
Yeah, so that's a tricky question because there's a lot of different possible answers. But I think, and I think Mark hit on this before, I think communication is absolutely critical in terms of making sure that people are informed of not only the capabilities that you have and the capabilities that they have available to them. So when I think about the use of collaboration tools, that has been, prior to COVID or BC, we had around 60,000 sessions a month with the department. And last week we hit over 400,000 sessions in a month. So I think from a collaboration tools and making sure that people understand how to use them and just in terms of capability outside in, I think that is really critical, because it doesn't matter if you have a great set of services if people don't know they're available or don't know how to use them, which goes to the second piece, which is education. Not just communicating, but educating and making sure that people are aware and then of course, receiving feedback. We've got tons of feedback, a lot of it extremely positive, but some of it as in, hey, we didn't think of this problem. And what's fascinating now is because we have thousands of people who are now working remotely, there's other challenges that have come up that, we didn't think of. And I'll just kind of to give some context here. I think one of the things that certainly maybe were in people's minds when we first transitioned from a COVID standpoint to where we're at now was, how can we ensure that people are working and producing? But what's been fascinating is to watch the flip of that, where how can we make sure people are not working too much and disconnecting from work more, because sometimes people feel like they're now always connected. So those are just a couple.
Well, thanks, Jason. I think the idea of being a digital organization is really built around that outside-in approach, because you've really changed the way you go about building systems and interacting with customers and employees. And again, I wrote down collaboration and then education, making sure people know what's possible, to give them the ability to work how they want to. Mark, thinking about the people you support in the school children, the educators, what sort of reaction do you have to that concept of digital and tied to outside in development, design, user-centered design? Maybe sometimes that's how we think about it.
I think
people support good outcomes.
Sort of to go off of what Jason said as well, our director made a good statement a few months ago about we went from working at home to living at work. And it really seems like that a lot of times the way we are now. But our users, as we, with all that we had going on, the new technologies that they were experiencing, what we were providing to them, it couldn't be with a lot of training. We had to use the KISS method. We had to keep it simple. We had to roll it out and provide some training. It was a much different environment. Previously, we would have had lunch and learns. We would have did all these things to support a rollout. The help desk tech used to be able to come to your desk and help you with your laptop. That doesn't happen anymore. That, the ability to touch and show people things wasn't available. So back to that collaboration and communication. How did we do desktop support? Changed totally from that perspective if they were having a problem. Getting an understanding, getting the necessary training down to the user to be able to utilize whatever that application, whatever that device was, as quickly as possible so they could get it out and moving as well. It was a great partnership with us, with our education technologist, because they're a big part of the education environment as well. And they're working on that technology that supports education. We're side by side with them working on the technology from an information perspective, and there's a great partnership there. That was a big success for us because they're the ones who are more local to the teachers, help the teachers through the technology, everything from how do I work my interactive flat panel to how do I use Google Classroom. So there was a lot of partnership, working, training in a very short time frame. Looking back now, I don't know that we could have done it any differently. But I think as we're moving forward in the future, we are looking at different ways of developing training. We're rolling out different things. We've rolled out Microsoft Teams. We've got a much larger platform now than we had previously, which was coming. We expedited the rollout of that to help support the organization. Good
comments, Mark. I think that's a really, it's a really relevant example for what we're talking about, and sets up, you could apply that approach to a lot of challenges an organization has, whether it's rolling out new technology to support a new program, pandemic, or just the natural change management that occurs over time in an organization. I think that's a really great muscle your organization has that you can flex for different reasons. We're going to put the poll results back up for a second. the first poll. And I thought it was interesting that the biggest challenge was virtual capacities of everything we put up there, because a lot of it has to do with the collaboration tools, the ability to work under in new ways, using Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Google Meet, all these different capabilities. So that was the biggest challenge for a lot of people in transition, it sounds like. And then just I thought also interesting that a lot of organizations, 38% according to this to our respondents, only had it was either not challenging at all for 8%, or 38% said they only had a few challenges. So that transition, while it may have been a little bit unique within different organizations, the investments that we've been making in IT modernization over the past several years, I worked back when I was in the government just a few years ago, as FITAR rolled out and IT modernization was, really critical in the last administration, getting us started with cloud and moving forward. Those investments really paid off now. May not have seen like it at the time, but they're, I think, core to the difference that you guys are describing, having gotten started. Jason certainly spoke to that. And I think that the respondents here are noting that their organizations didn't have tremendous challenges in moving. So I think it's a great sign and a great story for the federal IT community about what we can do if we invest wisely and build our organizations well. And we're going to put up a second poll that we'll get the answers back in a few minutes. You'll see that second poll in just a second. So here, how confident are you in your agency's ability to embrace digital transformation efforts during and then after the pandemic? And I think that after is an important part of that question. And then how do you think your agency responded to COVID? We'll get back to this in a few minutes, but we do have a question that's come in for Jason, and I'd like to see if we can go ahead and address that. So Jason and Mark, feel free to comment this as well. Jason, can you share maybe one or two trends that you're seeing in education in the post-COVID era? And how does IT support these changes going forward?
Yeah, so I think one is as I mentioned briefly before, the use of the collaboration tools that we have from a trend standpoint. I would also say supply chain management has been a very fascinating experience, because the just-in-time process that we historically had used changed when suddenly everyone was having a challenge getting equipment. And just the example I typically use is for a while there, it was hard to go to the grocery store and even get toilet paper, let alone any sort of disinfectant or that sort of thing, which is still a challenge. So I think from a trend standpoint, it certainly allowed us to kind of recalibrate, from a supply chain standpoint of, what is the right amount of equipment and services to have. So I think that another area, and I've really tried to focus on 4 key areas, which is enhancing our processes or re-looking at our processes because of the pandemic, looking at our policies. Are there policies that we need to change because of how we respond to the pandemic? What sorts of tools out there are we using that have been great? What other types of tools out there are available that could perhaps consolidate or ease? And then again, how can we better educate our team? And I completely agree with Mark's comment about keeping it simple, because you don't have a lot of time. You got to ramp up very quickly. And the great news about technology today is there's a lot of really simple, pretty advanced solutions out there and capabilities out there that is open for people is open for people to use.
Jason, just a quick note, your supply chain comment is, I think, really on point. It wasn't just the toilet paper and things like that. When you think about the public schools in the United States, they're a source for many children to receive healthy food. I worked at the USDA for a long time. I worked at the Food and Nutrition Service, an agency there, and the school lunch program, the school breakfast program. Those are critical programs for a lot of kids. And those schools close, making sure that there are options for children to to eat, to get the food they deserve. Just as challenging as what you're describing. But the supply chain is really broken down in a lot of ways. So being thinking about how goods and services, data even is able to move through the large ecosystem. I think sounds like that's a best practice to be prepared for the future, certainly.
Absolutely. And I think Mark hit on that when he was talking about, as a CIO, you're always trying to predict the future. Supply chain was definitely an area that fortunately things worked out well for us, but I think going forward, it definitely gave us some good lessons learned on these are some other things we should be thinking of.
Great. Mark, anything you want to add there? I do have a question that's just come in for you as well.
Just real quick on the emerging technology, I think that's a struggle a lot in education, because we always struggle to find the right technology for the right grade, for the right, at least in the K through 12 environment, for that student to have in their hand to be able to do what they need to do. Sometimes curriculum calls out a different device than you have on hand, back to that supply chain. How do I now get, because someone in the curricular side ordered this new curriculum that needs 100 iPads, how do I get that quickly? So there's always a fine balance, I think, and emerging as we move forward, as more of that merges and technology sort of expands to cover multiple areas, I think it'll be much better for us in education. I just wanted to add to that, but I did owe everything Jason said before that. So
very good. Now, the question that came in for you, Mark, I think ties into your comment you just made. The question asks, how do you go about evaluating new technology to solve new and existing use cases? So that iPad example you just mentioned,
mm-hmm.
You need 100 iPads to be able to teach a class. Well, you haven't had iPads in this kind of environment before. How do you evaluate the tools that support, that technology capability?
So we just established, and this was in process before, but we've emphasized it now, classroom technology group, basically, that works in conjunction with IT, ETs, teachers, educators, external people from the organization as well, where we collaborate and come together, look at the curriculum, look at the grade level. I mean, especially for us, a kindergartner can't remember a 16-character password with uppercase, lowercase. We've got to find different ways of providing access and capability to the younger students, to the SPED students. There's a lot of variety. So we couldn't do that in IT. I mean, that's not us to decide that. So we're back to the partnership. We're pulling together a group that will stay together. This is not a one-time thing. This is a group that will stay together. We're calling them Champions Program. So we have champions out in each school in each region that are part of this group that we're consistently or constantly really identifying new technologies moving forward that align with the curriculum, that align with emerging trends from the educational side of the house, as well as we have cybersecurity in there. We have privacy personnel. Everybody's a part of that group, so we can lay out a good future plan. We do an IT roadmap every year that informs the teachers and everyone of what's coming from a technology perspective. But it's that partnership. I mean, that group of teachers, industry experts, as well as LEAs and others outside the organization, we're searching, we're looking. We all believe we can work together to fix that problem.
I mean, that sounds like a fantastic capability you've added into the organization, a governance process, a collaboration process that will serve you well to build that readiness for what's going to come in the future. If we're all thinking about the fact that we're going to have to make change over time and it's going to evolve, those changes tend to be better accepted when they come from that kind of committee. I think it's a really smart move, Mark. I applaud your, the organization creating that kind of group. We're going to put the results from the second poll back up. Put those results up in a second here, and I really, I think it's amazing, and I think it's great that 80% of our respondents here are confident or moderately confident, or add in the extremely confident at the top, 95% that will continue our digital transformations in our organizations. I think we're past the tipping point. COVID has sped up all of these kinds of changes and evolution. I think across all industries, value chains have been really broken, and people have different expectations. And I think government really gets it. And the digital transformation that we've started is only going to accelerate. I think we see that here. And also very pleased to see that 85% of our respondents were satisfied or very satisfied with how their agencies responded. As a former Fed, I'm very proud to see that and understand, recognize that the government's led the way in a lot of sense around COVID. We have about 10 minutes left, and we have another question. I want to make sure that we get to some lessons learned. And I'm going to open this question up to Jason and Mark. I'd like you to comment on it too. How are you handling accessibility in a virtual remote world? I think, I take that to mean both, not everybody can access these technologies, but at the same time, what if people don't have access to internet, or they don't have the ability to interact in the way that others can?
Yeah, so I would say much like we do normally, meaning that if a user has a requirement, we have a request process that goes through. We have an entire team that's dedicated to assistive technology to make sure that we can facilitate any unique requirement for employees. As I'd mentioned briefly earlier, we are a contractor-owned, contractor-operated, meaning I have a small, around 100 federal employees, and then the rest of the staff are supported by contractors. As an example, our help desk is in Louisiana. Fortunately, on the far north west side of Louisiana right now. But so we're handling it just like we would even prior to COVID. Just talking to the employees and getting them what they need to make sure they can do their work.
Very good. Mark, accessibility. And I think when you're educating students, you have a range of ability. How have you had to deal with this?
So from an employee perspective, we were in the process of a life cycle program. So our employees were covered. We had challenges with those that had been authorized departure and were on leave without pay and needed to come back. So there were a number of challenges we had to work through. Really, our students were the main groups that we found that there was lack of devices at home, lack of internet. So we distributed about 7,700 laptops, Chromebooks to students around the world, and about 249 hotspots. Back to Jason's comment about supply and needing things. We had that amount based on our ratio within the schools, and our high schools were 1-to-1. Middle and elementary were a 2-to-1 ratio, which became problematic. When you're not, a lot of the schools out, around our areas are a 1-to-1 ratio. We chose not to do that previously from a funding perspective, and we're operating fine when we're at brick and mortar. But now when we move out, not every student, not every child has a computer at home. You have larger families with 4 or 5 children. How does that work around, virtual learning with one computer at the home and 5 kids got to get on there to do their lessons?
Mm-hmm.
So we were distributing laptops as quickly as we could, signing those out, providing the support for those. Again, if they got the laptop home and it didn't work, it's back to the ET or IT to help support from that perspective. So we understood that there was a general important need, and still is even now. We're actually seeing some numbers increase as we're working in the 3 environments, just because Tommy's in virtual school, his sister's in brick and mortar. There's 2 different requirements there in a single household that we have to meet at this point. So
that's very complex. And Mark, there's one specific question for you about asking what the response to Teams has been. Is Microsoft Teams something you rolled out as part of this?
We are. We increased the rollout, across the department. They've done some things as well, but ours is our Microsoft for Education is what we operate on. And we rolled out Teams as part of this. We had Google Meet, which the educators were using and teaching for the classroom. Our goal was to roll out Teams in this long rollout period. We didn't have that. We had to roll it out and are still rolling it out actually down to the regional level. But just getting it out there as quickly as possible gave an alternative. We were having a lot of problems with our Skype link connection. Immediately when we all went remote and everybody now began to rely on that capability, it wouldn't hold it. We didn't have that capability. So here we had to roll out Teams and expanded the use of Google Meet for us. But we wanted to focus Google Meet specifically on the education and initially Microsoft Teams just on the business side of the house or the administrative side of the house. Eventually we'll look at what's the product in the future, but right now we have failover. If one doesn't work, we jump to the other. So the failover was really important. That wasn't necessarily thought about, but now you've got your entire workforce working off of one thing. If there's no failover with that thing, now your entire workforce is down and your mission's dead.
And systems go down. We all know that, having been in IT. So we have just a few minutes left, and I want to return to Jason to get some lessons learned and some concluding thoughts, and then Mark will give you the the last word on that.
So I think I've covered the majority of them. I will say that the absolute most important thing is that IT modernization is critical. The collaboration and partnership with your leadership and your peers to make sure that they understand the significance and the value add and the ROI on what you're investing in so that you have buy-in is absolutely critical. Supply chain as well. I think the continuity and redundancy and looking for single points of failure to make sure that you shore those up. I know when we first started this journey, our VPN capability was right at around where the department, a little bit more than what the department needed to have all employees working at the same exact time. And there wasn't a moment that went by where I wasn't thinking, well, what happens if one of those devices fail? Again, we had continuity and we had a process built in, but it's the sort of thing where now any of the processes we have, certainly as it relates to VPN, could fail, or all but one could fail, and we'd still be able to provide the services. So I think from a lessons learned standpoint, and then the communication about everything that's going on is absolutely critical, so that because you have people not sure, not just from a technology standpoint, but even from a, what is the, how is the new normal going to be for the department? And I will say the Department of Education has been great on, this is our plan, this is what this means to you, which we've also leveraged from an IT standpoint to talk about, here's how we're providing support, this is what this means to you. So communicate all, it's been absolutely critical.
Well, thanks, Jason. Mark.
I think, we started school the 24th. That was when our biggest opening was, and operating in these three environments has been a challenge. But day one of school is successful. And I think it's taking these lessons learned, looking, as Jason mentioned, to the future, and DoD has also given us guidance of what the future might look like. And beginning to look at the future and taking what we've done and beginning to work towards what will be the new normal, AC after COVID, because it is going to come. We're working towards that, but we always have to keep these lessons learned, I think, and the challenges that we faced and overcome. We'll face more, but at least in the back of our minds as we're planning forward, we've gained knowledge. We've gained, and Jason mentioned about his VPN. Ours was the same way. If we weren't in 3 time zones, we would have failed. But the fact that we were in 3 time zones, I could watch the numbers, and I watched the numbers climbed up and get almost to the top of that VPN, sweating to say, oh no, who's going to be the first one to get kicked out? Hopefully not the director. And, all of a sudden it would go back down as the time zone. So we barely made it. We've upgraded. We understand. I think most organizations are really looking at lessons learned and trying to improve and move forward and move into what this new is going to be for us as IT professionals. More remote, more technology, more different devices, a lot, is going to be changing as we've all worked through this.
Well, I mean, great comments there. And I think the complexity only ratchets up as we think about a safe return to the workplace, a safe return to the classroom, in schools, not just, in the DoD, but across the country, as we understand what that's going to look like, the process of understanding how to get people and children physically distance as appropriate, or understand the management of PPE. Those are all on the horizon for you guys inside of your organizations and your customers. So, it sounds to me like you have a great start to deal with that next set of challenges based on your investments in modernization and the success you've had so far. And I wrote down 3 words that I think, form the basis of, some takeaways for everyone. Communication, collaboration, and education. And, if we're doing those things in our organizations, irrespective of COVID or another crisis, we're going to have stronger, more resilient organizations that are ready for anything, that can be productive in a time of crisis, that can be digitally resilient. So with that, I want to conclude our conversation today. And I want to invite everybody to join the next ATARC webinar. Next week on Thursday, September 3rd, we're going to have another conversation where we're going to have some subject matter experts focus on the cultural shifts that are happening in the federal DevOps ecosystem as a result of COVID-19, and how agencies are continuing to update their systems despite workforce changes. So you can see the upcoming webinar here, and I hope that you're able to join. I want to thank everybody again for being here today. I especially want to thank Jason Gray, who is the CIO for the Department of Education, and Mark Patterson, who is the CIO for the Defense Education Activity, for their insightful comments, their willingness to share their successes and their challenges, and provide everybody with some great opportunities for learning. So that's all, and hope to see you again next week. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.